Welcome to the Southeastern 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We're giving Blake Lovell the day off today. Barry Allen joins me as we talk baseball. We've got lots to talk about. I'm going to go over my predictions for the seeding in Hoover. I am going to go over our Player of the Year list for pitchers and non-pitchers, which we put on the site yesterday. We'll talk about that. But unfortunately, Barry, and this has just been a recurring theme all year, pitcher injuries and injuries in general, and we got another big one in Athens, and man, I hated to see this one.
Yeah, we talked yesterday about the rash of injuries, and they just seem like they keep coming. And Ryan Webb is going to be shut down for the rest of the season for Georgia. Having a good year for them. Had some elbow issues. Scott Strickland said yesterday they're just kind of looking for some more details, and you get something like this, he said you just kind of have to, I guess they got an MRI, look at it, have, a lot of different trainers, doctors, surgeons look at it and put their heads together, try to figure out what the next step is. But his next step is Ryan Webb is going to be shut down for the remainder of the season, and that's a blow to a Georgia pitching staff who is already bullpenning one of the SEC games anyway, and now they're down another starter for a team that's 11-13 in the league and going to Florida and hosting Ole Miss the last two weekends. The health and safety of the kid is first, and I commend Scott Strickland for taking the kid and his health and safety first over the team. And I'm not saying anybody else in the league wouldn't do that either, but there are sometimes kids aren't always honest with you and go, well, it's not that bad, So good for them for realizing that it is an issue, and they got to get him right because, the guy can make some money down the road. But in the present state, it doesn't really help Georgia at all. And an 11-13 in the league, it's puts them behind the eight ball now, trying to win a couple of series that they need to try to bolster their SEC standings and perhaps make the NCAA tournament. And that might make that a little bit more difficult path for them as we move forward against Florida and Ole Miss the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, the path was already not easy for Georgia. The Bulldogs have got the toughest schedule remaining, I think, with Florida in Gainesville and Ole Miss in Georgia. So, I mean, not easy either way, but not that anybody's got much of an easy schedule outside of a couple teams. You play someone in the SEC, chances are they're good teams, but I think that's not an easy remaining path. I've seen several games in person this year. I saw Webb pitch against Vanderbilt here in Nashville. Saw in person, sat behind the plate, watched him throw. He struck out 13 today. I saw him. He was a lefty with a terrific breaking ball. Fastball was, I think, 93, 94, according to the Stadium Gun when I saw him. He's a guy that I think is still going to get drafted. Might have been a top 5 round pick without the surgery. With the surgery, I don't know what he's going to be, but, man, it's just an epidemic. And speaking of Nashville and pitching, I guess the thing we're watching now is Jack Leiter and Vanderbilt. Tim Corbin, I listened to him speak yesterday, talked to him a bit. He sounded optimistic that Leiter can throw. My guess is that he will. Of course, Ole Miss down Gunnar Hoagland. It's going to move Doug Nikhazy to the Friday start to oppose Kumar Rocker. But, boy, if you don't have Hoagland and you don't have Leiter, one of the series that I circled is probably one of the 5 that I most wanted to watch before the season. Takes on a very different complexion in that instance.
Yeah, and Hoagland, Rocker, Nikhazy, Leiter might have been the best 2 head-to-head pitching matchups of any of the series all year long. Those are star power names and high draft pick guys, and I mean Leiter and Nikhazy would have been a headline in itself. And that's game 2 of the series if all things are even and everybody's healthy, and then have Hoagland and Rocker go at it Friday night. That's big time pitching right there for 4 starters of that quality going head to head in the same weekend in the same stadium. That's star power and high quality pitchers going in the league. But unfortunately, with the injuries, one to Hoagland and two to Leiter, and not sure if he's going to go this weekend. It doesn't take a lot of luster off the series because, hey, we're still going to have Rocker and Nikhazy, on Friday night in game one in Oxford, and it'll be electric. I mean, it will be an electric night. We talked about Ole Miss yesterday, maybe the weather, maybe not playing that game last night against Little Rock, and they ran some arms out there last night and they struck out 18. They struck out 18 guys against Little Rock last night, won 9-4, played really well. I didn't catch all the game, but I saw some of it on the SEC Plus network. But they seem to be ready to go and had a good midweek win, and now they got Vanderbilt coming in, and I think Rocker and Nikhazy Friday night will be one of the premier matchups in the league this year. Like if it had been Jaden Hill and against somebody, or it would have been nice to see Connor Prelip go against, Rocker or Leiter. But there's a lot of star power in this league with pitchers. But Friday night in Oxford will certainly be one of those headline nights, and it'd be a lot of people, as they say, must see TV.
Yeah, there's a lot of that this year. Speaking of pitchers, I shuffled our pitcher rankings. Kumar Rocker had been my top pitcher in our power rankings, which is basically based on how you've done this year. I replaced him with Kevin Kopps at the top of the list, which is just incredible that you have a reliever at the top spot with all the great starters. But when you're allowing a .45 ERA in 40 SEC innings, that's crazy. I mean, he's got an 0.72 overall in 49 2/3 innings. Basically, when you've given up 4 runs all year and no unearned runs either, I think that speaks pretty loudly. My question, though, with Kopps, Barry, man, 40 innings is a lot. He's making, I think, 2 appearances most weekends. He throws a lot of breaking balls. When I've seen him, it's mostly breaking balls. I'm just wondering, are we worried about injury risk with Kevin Kopps throwing that much?
Well, I think you are. I mean, I think anybody, can get hurt at any time. I don't know that Dave Van Horn or Kevin Kopps is sitting over there going, well, if I go out there and throw 2 innings tonight, I might get hurt. I think he's just, in the moment of the game, and he's found a guy that can do this. I mean, he's not a 1-inning guy. I mean, I think he threw 3+ innings the other day against Georgia. He's had a lot of 2-inning, 3-inning games, 3-inning saves. I mean, the guy is so valuable to them. I mean, it's really incredible at how valuable he is. Overall, they have 37 wins. He has 7 wins and 7 saves. So he's responsible for 14 of their 37 wins overall this year. They have 17 SEC wins this season. He's responsible for 10 of their 17 SEC wins. I mean, if they win tomorrow night at Tennessee and he doesn't factor in the game, he's still over half their games. And he's just a valuable commodity. He's a guy that can pitch every day. I mean, he's got 65 strikeouts in 40 innings in the SEC. I mean, that's Landon Sims, Kumar Rocker, those. I mean, he's living in that neighborhood, those kind of guys. And I'll throw this out at you with the power rankings, and you have Kopps at 1 and Rocker at 2 and Wicklander at 3 and Leiter at 4. The top 4 guys are Vandy, Arkansas guys. Do the SEC coaches have enough? I don't say guts. That's not the right way to say that. But do the SEC coaches look at this and go, "This guy's the pitcher of the year in the SEC"? I mean, is Kevin Kopps going to be considered by all 14 head coaches to be the pitcher of the year in the SEC? I certainly think he could be, and probably should be. But how will they? What's your thoughts on? Do you think those 14 guys, when they sit down? I mean, obviously it's going to be Rocker, Leiter, Marceau, Nikhazy, but what about Kevin Kopps, and what about Landon Sims for that matter? Do they have any kind of chance?
Well, here's my suspicion. Okay. I think there's always a little bit of who you are in those things. Like David Price was player of the year back in 2007 nationally, and Price was outstanding, but like he didn't have like a a 1.40 ERA. I think it was closer to 3. But a lot of that was everybody knew what Price was. They saw the dominating games. They knew the pro potential. I think that's always factored in, like especially at Baseball America. I think a lot of their All-American teams and things are slanted towards pro potential. Now, when I'm doing my rankings, I have these guys, I have their stats side by side so I can make comparisons. And I kind of do this thing where I'll slide a guy to a certain spot and I'll look at the guy that I've got right behind him and the guy right in front of him and do an endless set of comparisons until I feel like I've slid each guy into the right spot. When I look at Kopps and Leiter, this is not answering your question because you're asking me, what are the coaches and the voters going to do? And I have my suspicions, but I can't speak for them. I don't know their thought process for sure. But let me tell you how I thought about this, okay? Kopps has thrown 49 and 2/3 innings. He's given up 4 runs. Not just earned runs, 4 runs. Rocker has thrown 74 innings, giving up 22 runs and 19 runs. So let's say that Kumar Rocker had given up 4 runs in 49 and 2/3 innings. Are you happy at that point about another, 24 1/3 innings in which you give up 15 runs? I'm guessing that might do you more harm than good. And that's kind of how I broke the tie. Look at the marginal performance that Rocker gave you over what Kopps had if you zero out the stats. Oh, by the way, Arkansas, by the computers, at least the RPI computers, has played a tougher schedule. You go to league and you look at things, and Rocker's got a 3.35 ERA in 51 innings. Kopps has got a 0.45 in 40 innings. Now, look, am I saying, like, if you could build a Major League Baseball franchise and you can have one of those two guys for the next 10, 15 years, who am I going to take? Well, of course, the answer is Kumar Rocker. But that's not the question we're trying to decide here. But I don't know if that's how the voters look at it, if that makes sense.
And two, from Rocker's standpoint, everybody expects him to be really, really good every day. And that's not going to happen. I mean, he's going to get hit. I mean, he's going to give up some runs. I mean, and so you look at him and, his margin for error is just razor thin just because they go, oh, well, he didn't pitch good last night. We gave up 3 runs in 8 innings and he punched out 11. He pitched really well, but that's not what people expect from him. And his expectations, I think, are higher than others. I think Leiter's are higher than others, especially coming out and throwing the no-hitter the first week of SEC and then going 17 hitless innings before, and so many innings without a run before things got going for him, before he got into the middle of the season. So when he went out and gave up 3 home runs in a game against Tennessee, or he got hit around against Mississippi State, everybody's going, well, what's wrong with Jack Leiter? Well, nothing. There's nothing wrong with him. So now he's given up 6 home runs in 8 starts, and 6 of them just happened to come in 3 games, as opposed to doing it over the course of the season, a home run here and a home run there. Well, there's nothing wrong with him. He's still really good. And I think their margin for error is really thin because of the expectations that people have for them. And I just think you look at Kopps, and I think you have to look at him from day one. He's just been the same guy every day. And he may get his brains beat in Knoxville this weekend. I don't know. But I don't think that's going to happen just based on the way he's pitched all year long. And I think he's been very consistent. And when they need an out, 2 outs, 8 outs, they go to him and he gets it done. And I think he calls it a slider. It's not a fastball, but at South Carolina that night, he threw like 42, 43 pitches, and 40 or 41 of them were sliders or off speed, but I think he calls it his slider or whatever, and it just dominates guys. I mean, he's dominating good lineups all year long, and he's the same guy every night he goes out there. And Arkansas knows what they're going to get. Dave Van Horn knows what they're going to get. And I think the opponents know what they're going to get. And I thought it was funny. I think it was a fan. You read Twitter and see people commenting on stuff. And I don't remember who it was, so it had to be a fan. But just talking about, do you think the opponents, when they talk about a scouting report for Arkansas's pitchers, they they have written down Kevin Kopps, and then out to the side they go, "Good luck."
That's about it right now.
Good
right?
luck. Best of luck to you. You know, they'll tell what other guys throw. They get to Kevin Kopps, they go, "Good luck." And that's kind of how it is. And you know, I don't know how the guys are going to vote, and I don't know. You know, I'm like you. I can't get into their minds and know what they do. But if there's ever been a relief pitcher that had a chance to be the pitcher of the year in the SEC, it's this guy right here, Kevin Kopps.
You know, I'm thinking of MLB comps or something like we've ever seen at that level. It's like the year that Mike Marshall pitched for the Dodgers and threw like 160 relief innings and saved 18 games and won 15 or whatever it was. Like, that's the closest thing that I've ever seen at any other level of baseball to what he's doing.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Now, we've had some really good pitchers and stuff over the years. I remember, I will try to see if I can find the stats real quick. But I remember, you know, Brad Wilkerson, you know, at Florida was a two-way guy that did a lot of really good things, you know, when he was there. And then when I was at Alabama, you know, we had a guy that was was a two-way guy as well, Roberto Vaz, who's now an assistant coach at LSU Eunice. And this guy had an incredible 1997 season, and I'm trying to get his stats called up here. He hit 400. He hit 22 home runs as our DH and left fielder, but he had 4 wins and 8 saves. You know, as a reliever, and made 4 starts. He had 52 strikeouts, but he gave up 19 runs, you know, in 50 innings, which was not bad. But of course, you know, that may be the equivalent to 4 runs today, because that was a gorilla ball era, and you could hit a pop up to the first baseman and it ended up being a 3-run homer, you know, with those bats. But you know, those are 2 guys, you know, two-way guys. But you know, there've been a lot of good relievers. You know, Auburn had Greg Olson in the 80s, and I remember we faced him one night in Huntsville in a non-conference game, and they brought him in. I think Auburn beat Alabama 3-1 in 11 innings. They brought him in the 9th inning with the game tied, and struck the first guy out on 3 pitches, and he was walking back to the dugout, and the guy on deck approaching home plate, he goes, "What's he got?" And he goes, "I don't know, but it sounded really hard." And he goes, "I didn't see him. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you." He said they just sounded really fast. And I think he struck out the side in the 9th and the 10th, and then they took him out, and they won the game in the 11th inning anyway. But I mean, you just have guys like that you just have some hitters just have no clue against them, and it's just it's been that way for Kopps. It's been a magical year for him, and for him and for Arkansas. They certainly hope it continues, you know, on into the postseason.
You asked about Landon Sims. Sims has been incredible in his own right. In the SEC, he has pitched 20 1/3 with a .44 ERA. He's given up 1 run that was earned, no unearned runs. Overall, he has got a .49 ERA? No, a .56 in 32 innings. So the difference between he and Kopps has allowed a few more runs, but he's also thrown, 17 more innings, which is a pretty substantial difference when you compare the two side by side. That's why I've got Sims lower. I start looking, it's not just what's your ERA, but how many innings you've thrown. And that's why Sims is going to have a hard time moving up the list, just because when he only throws 32 innings, and granted, those are very important innings, but you don't have a lot of starters in the league who can go 6 and 7 consistently and put your team in a position to win. That's a very hard skill. And you could say, on the other hand, maybe that's why Sims and Kopps aren't in their rotations. That may not be it, but sometimes those guys don't have the pitch mix or the endurance to go longer as starters, which, all things considered, a starter is always your more valuable guy if you're comparing a good reliever to a good starter. But this is an unusual circumstance for both these guys. But when you're asking about Sims and Kopps, it's just a matter of innings and durability. And by the way, just to be exact here, Kopps has thrown 712 pitches this year. Sims 504. You start looking at the starters: Rocker 1148, Leiter 1089, Marceau 1109, and then you got a few more guys who've thrown 1,000 pitches or more. Dylan Smith at Alabama 1,140, AJ Labus 1063, Tommy Mace 1057, Seth Halverson at Missouri the same number, And I'm looking down the list. Those are the only guys who have thrown over 1,000 pitches this year. Not that that really matters in terms of how we judge them, but if you want to get an idea of workload, these are the guys who are throwing a ton of pitches. But I want to ask you this, Barry. To me right now, it is hard to see anybody outside of the two Vandy pitchers and the two Arkansas pitchers getting pitcher of the year. I mean, I think Landon Marceau and Doug Nikhazy are the guys who could have an argument, but I think with LSU and Ole Miss not going to finish in that top group of finishers, probably. I mean, Ole Miss has got a shot, but I think it's a long shot at this point. So I don't think they're going to go. When you got two teams that I think everybody right now thinks Vanderbilt and Arkansas are the best two teams in the league, maybe the best two teams in the country, when they each have two guys who are performing at exceptionally high levels, I have a hard time thinking whoever is voted pitcher of the year is going to come outside of those four.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've subscribed to that theory for a long time. That you look at guys, you take their numbers, and you look at them, and you go, well, this guy was really good, but I also think you have to take their team into consideration. And I keep going back to this. Brandon Larson. 1997 led the NCAA with 47 home runs, and he was not the SEC Player of the Year. Roberto Vaz, I just gave you his numbers: 422 homers, ton of RBIs, 4 wins on the mound, 8 saves, a bunch of strikeouts for Alabama. And those two teams played for the national championship, and neither one of those guys were the Player of the Year. The Player of the Year in 1997 was Tim Hudson for Auburn, who was a two-way guy who had a great year. A lot of hits, good high batting average. I think he won 10 or 15. I think he won 15 games that year. But Auburn finished like 4th or 5th in the West. So if they hadn't had Hudson, they could have still finished 4th or 5th. To me, they would have still finished 4th or 5th in the West, or maybe they would have finished 6th. But it's not that big of a difference between 4th and 5th and 6th as comparing to the team that won the national championship and won the SEC and won the West with a guy that knocked 44 balls out of the ballpark. And I think, Hunter Bledsoe for Vanderbilt won the Player of the Year in 1999 on a Vanderbilt team that didn't make the SEC tournament or didn't get in the NCAA tournament. I mean, so I think there's a lot of value to not only that you have to have a great year, but to me, I think your team has to be good.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit because you can't help it if you're on a team that stinks. I would say as a two-way player too, if you've got a lot of value as a hitter and a lot of value as a pitcher, that's really hard to overcome. I mean, I do see your point. To me, I look at that as more of a tiebreaker, that if your team is in consideration for a title or in position to win a title, then all of a sudden there's more pressure to the games. The impact of your performance is more important. Oh, by the way, with Kopps too, it's not just the innings he's pitching, but he's pitching high leverage innings where the game a lot of time is on the line. So I would say I would differentiate in how you go through it a little bit. But to me, I think if it's close, if you are like Hunter Bledsoe, good example. Okay, I think if your stats earn you that, then it earns you. But if it's close and another guy is every weekend going out there and pitching or hitting with the title on the line, those are two totally different sets of circumstances.
I think that's what I think that's how I look at it. It's one thing that your team is not in contention. Your team is, and I know it's not your fault that your team's not any good, but it's the pressure there of trying to win, a series to get to the SEC tournament or get in the NCAA tournament. You're probably not going to win anyway, as opposed to playing a team against a guy who, is going out and putting up the same type of numbers, but he's doing it in a division where, they're really good. And my comparison to that with Bledsoe was, Andy Phillips at Alabama that year had a phenomenal year. And, South Carolina was the only SEC East team in 1999 to have and they didn't even have a winning record. They were 15-15 in the East. And Alabama finished second in the West with 21 wins, and Arkansas finished first in the West with 22 wins. And they had Richie Nye, and he had as good a numbers too. And either one of those guys who were playing for an SEC title every day and every night for the whole season, as opposed to another player who wasn't. I think that has to have some merit in there, and that would be how I would look at it and go, well, this guy had more quality appearances than this guy because his team was, playing more high leverage games. There were more high leverage at bats, high leverage innings, and things like that. And we touch back on the two relievers, Kopps and Sims, for the season. Now this is the season. 56% of Kopps' outs are strikeouts, and 65% of Sims' outs are strikeouts. So that tells me with Landon Sims that every inning he pitches, he gets 2 strikeouts. And Kopps is at 55%. He's going about a little over 1.5 strikeouts per inning. And that takes a ton of pressure off your defense. It cuts down on the errors. It's just hard to overcome those two guys. But a lot of good pitchers in this league, a lot of worthy candidates. But I do agree that I think the pitcher of the year is going to come from either Arkansas or Vanderbilt.
I'm going to give you some detailed numbers on some of these guys. I say detailed. Don't let your eyes gloss over and tune me out, because I think these things are interesting. And these are all as a percentage of plate appearances. Free pass numbers, that is hit batsmen plus walks divided by the batters you faced. Kopps 7%, Rocker 9%, Wicklander 8%, Leiter 13%. Strikeout percentage is a percentage of hitters you faced. Kopps 44%, Rocker 38%, Wicklander 27%, Leiter 42%. Home run percentage, Kopps 1.1, Rocker 1.4, Wicklander 1.4, Leiter 3.5. So Leiter's got 2 numbers in terms of control and home runs that are kind of outliers with the other 3. Ground ball percentage, Kopps 24, Rocker 17, Wicklander 18, Leiter 11. Fly ball percentage, Kopps only 8. That's remarkable. Rocker 21, Wicklander 27, Leiter 21. To me, I look at this, I say Wicklander is probably due a little bit of regression. I think that you look at the numbers, I think that the 169 ERA, and I give credit to people for what they've done, right? So I don't discount Wicklander based on that, but I look at the numbers compared to the other guys, I'm going, he's not as dominant. There's probably going to be a day where he pitches about the same, but some of these balls maybe find some holes. Batting average on balls in play, Kopps 308, Rocker 253, Wicklander 291, Rocker 183, Leiter 183. Expected ERAs based on the runners and the type that you've given up. Kopps 139, Rocker 150, Wicklander 242, Rocker 178. So if you want to break these down to some details, that is how you compare these 4 pitchers.
Yeah, and those are mind-boggling numbers. It's hard to grasp all of that, and as you listen and you're trying to process all that. But the bottom line is those 4 guys are probably the best guys we got out there. And some are better in some situations than others. And like I said, just trying to process, all those numbers. It's in that short time is hard to and to try to give you a good solid answer with all of those numbers being thrown out there. But I like I said, I think they're all good in their own way. They all have things they do well. They all have things they probably could improve on. And it's just, they're just elite guys. And I think as you have them listed 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the league. And I think it's going to come down to probably one of those 4 guys. And, you'd like to make a case for Marceau at some point, and Nikhazy and some of the others, but I think it's going to come down to, somebody from Arkansas or somebody from Vanderbilt.
Yeah, two more things. Runners per innings pitched. Cops 0.87, Rocker 0.93, Wicklander 1.13, and Leiter 0.97. But one more thing on Cops is, again, 44% strikeout rate, 24% ground ball rate. That's 68% of the time the hitters he's facing are either hitting ground balls, which are usually going to be turned into outs, or strikeouts, which are always turned into outs unless your catcher can't handle one. So kind of hard to score many runs when you're striking out or you're not getting the ball in the air.
Yeah, it is. And, we mentioned Sims and Copp, so they're high strikeout percentages. But if, as long as putting the ball in play, it's hard to strike guys out when they're hitting ground balls and fly balls and different things. But, we mentioned Sims is, 2 out of every 3 outs an inning is a strikeout. And, Cops is 55% of his outs this year are strikeouts. And so, that makes them dominant pitchers because you're not getting the ball in play. And if you only have 45% of your, of your outs or I guess not 45%, you have to take consideration the hits and stuff, but not a ton of balls in play when, give yourself a chance to make your defense to make errors or make plays when you're striking guys out. So I think those two guys have been pretty dominant there.
The race for go ahead, Barry. I'm sorry.
Nothing. That's my thought. I don't know if that made a lot of sense because I'm trying to process all those numbers and it's kind of overwhelming to try to hear all those numbers at one time and try to give you a good concise answer on that. Cause I'm not sure that I adequately and properly answered your question, but it's just those numbers. There's just so many numbers to take into consideration, trying to determine, who the best pitchers are in the league. And I hopefully I did an okay job with that.
Well, here's the Cliff Notes version. All those guys are pretty special, and the numbers they're putting up are pretty special. You've got some cracks with Leiter that we've seen and talked about lately, and Wicklander, I think, has overachieved a little bit, but even so, he's had a phenomenal season under any circumstances. Now, hitter of the year or position players, I say hitter of the year, what I'm doing is I've lumped pitchers into one thing and everybody else in another. So where you're either a position player or a DH. To me, that race, pitcher of the year is far from settled too. But to me, in my mind, player of the year, if you pick it today, comes down probably between Liam Spence and Tanner Allen. And Spence is the one that I almost guarantee you won't win it. Now, he'd be my pick right now. People are going to look at him and say, okay, what's the big deal? 1 home run, 11 RBIs in SEC play. I would say, well, one, he's a shortstop. Now, he's been hurt a little bit, but he's fielding 986, which is incredibly good. Second of all, and that's in league play, is what he's fielding. He scored 26 runs because he's on base all the freaking time. He's got a .558 on base percentage in league games, and he's played every one of them. He's walked 29 times. He struck out 18. He's only slugging .494, and I'd like to see that mark better because I don't think that Spence is a game-changing guy with the bat. Like, he's not going to be the guy that comes up and you need a 2-run home run in a spot. He might not be that guy. But, Barry, when you get on base 56% of the time and hit .404 in league games, that's not something you see often.
No, it's not. And he's had a phenomenal year, and he's battled some hamstring injury this season, which has limited him a little bit. I noticed when he was playing Alabama, I saw 2 of the games here, and both nights they took him out like in the 6th or 7th inning for a pinch runner, and I'm like, you don't see people, taking their leadoff guy out for a pinch runner. And then I found out, that he's had some hamstring issues and he's been slowed by that. But I think he's had a phenomenal year. I think Tanner Allen's had an incredible year for Mississippi State. They're right in the thick of it. You look at your list on our site, the 14 guys, Arkansas's got Goodhart and Franklin, but they're down in the towards the bottom of the area. I think that's one thing that stands out for Arkansas for me is they don't have that one player of the year guy. They've got like a group of guys, Goodhart, Slavens, Franklin, Caden Wallace, Robert Moore, Casey Opitz. I mean, it's like they're a group of players of the year. If you put a team and said, okay, we're going to have the player of the year is going to be the team with the 5 best players, and that's probably going to be Arkansas. But if you're having a player of the year, they probably don't fit in that mold quite as well as some of these other guys. You have Trey Morgan is 4th on the list. I think he's probably got a shot to be the freshman of the year in the league. I think he's had an incredible year. So has Dylan Cruz, who's 11th on your list. I think he's had a phenomenal year. You look at Tennessee. Here we're talking about Tennessee. You're talking about Spence. We haven't talked about any of their pitchers being, on the pitcher of the year list. You got Jake Rucker at 13. This team could win the SEC. So it's somewhere in there. And I'm not saying Liam Spence is going to be the player of the year because Tennessee has to have somebody on that list. But somewhere in there, the SEC champion or East champion or whatever has got to have somebody represented. And Tennessee's another team where, I think Spence is really good and Rucker's really good, but they've also gotten a lot from Evan Russell and Gilbert and Lipsius, and their pitching's been really good. And we'll talk more about them as we talk about Tennessee-Arkansas series tomorrow. But, the 3 starters and 3 or 4 relievers, they're to me like Arkansas. They're just like an all-around really good team. And, it'll be an interesting discussion as the pitcher of the year will go. It'll be an interesting discussion for the hitter of the year. But, Spence and Allen, and you've got Enrique Bradfield, up there on the list as well. Certainly a guy that has a chance to, make some noise as well because he's such a dynamic player with his speed, his feet, his bat, and his arm. He does a lot for Vanderbilt at the top of the order.
Yeah, I feel like Spence might end up deserving the player of the year, but I don't think he's going to get it because I think that the voting is still stuck in the 1990s where we're looking at home runs and RBIs. And I'm not saying those things aren't important, but the thing that Spence does when you're getting on base that much, the contribution that he makes, it might not always show up. Let's say that you got 2 outs and you got runners first and second. And let's say that he takes a walk, which he does a lot. What that does is that keeps the inning going. Let's say the next guy hits a double, right? That's going to, or a single, that's probably going to score 2 runs if it's to the outfield. And then say the next guy makes an out, right? So Spence doesn't score a run. He doesn't get an RBI, but he made a contribution keeping the inning going. I think that's a lot of what Spence does that's going to get overlooked. I'd be really surprised if the SEC voters or the coaches, whoever, make him the player of the year, but I'm telling you, that's who I'm picking if we have to do it right now. Now, I'll tell you the guy that I think gets it. I think it's going to be, if he finishes the way that he has started, is probably Tanner Allen. I'm going to get to another element of why in a few minutes, but you look and he is 2nd in the league in batting average in all games. He is 4th in on-base percentage. By the way, Spence is leading in average and on base. He is in the top 10 in slugging. He is 7th. You look at hits. He is tied for 2nd, 3 behind Trey Morgan. Runs batted in. He is 9th. Of course, Spence is going to be nowhere near that list. And runs scored, he's going to be 5th. We like our counting stats. And look, I think that Tanner Allen may be a defensible player of the year choice in the end. In fact, I think that's what's going to happen. State schedule eases up. I think that he's going to go down there and just clobber pitching in Columbia this weekend, whereas Spence has got a tougher task. They've got South Carolina and Arkansas, so you could see his numbers dip. I'm not saying I've got a problem with Tanner Allen winning player of the year because I don't. But in my mind, I think those are the lead candidates. Trey Morgan deserves a lot of mention, too. I've got him up there on my list. I just think because of LSU being what it is, he's not going to get it. But to me, I think that it's Tanner and Spence at the top, and I suspect Tanner's going to come out of ahead in the end for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, he's their catalyst. I mean, I think if you watch their team, and I don't think any Mississippi State fans are going to get mad at me if I say this, but I think if you watch them play, he stands out. I think he's their best player. I think he's their best hitter. I think he's their catalyst. I think he's their fireworks. I think he's their get in your face and jack you up when you need to be jacked up. I think he's that kind of guy. And I've liked him for years. Obviously he's got a great last name. And my daughter and I kid, I'll tell her, I said, Cousin Tanner had 3 hits last night and a home run. She goes, oh, good. He's such a nice, we don't know him. We've never met the kid. I'm sure we're not related to him, but I mean, we just make a joke about that. And he's that guy. I mean, when he walks off A&M a couple of weeks ago, I think he's had 2 walk-off hits this year to win games for him. He's part of that World Series team a couple of years ago that had just an electric year. And I mean, he's that veteran guy that they leaned on coming into the season, he and Rowdy Jordan. And he's had a better year than Rowdy Jordan. And he's, in my opinion, nothing against Rowdy Jordan. I think he's a tremendous player, but I think Tanner Allen's a better player. And I think he's really good. And I think he's a big catalyst for them. And he's on one of the best teams. And I think it'll be a cool thing for him and for Mississippi State, if he were to win the player of the year, because I think, a lot of guys deserve it. And I think he's on that list of, quality players who can really, helps his team and produces when they need him. When they need a 2-out base hit, guess what? Tanner Allen's usually up. He had a big 3-run double to beat Ole Miss off Taylor Broadway in the 6th inning. And when they need a hit, he seems to always be the guy up at the plate, and he delivers more times than he doesn't.
Rowdy Jordan would be just a notch behind those guys if he just hit better out of the league. It's weird. He hits better, I think, in the league than he does outside it, which I don't understand. And he also plays a more high-impact defensive position, being that he's in center, which I think that gives you a boost too. Because I do consider, like, if you're doing this and the other guy's doing that, and the numbers are basically the same, but one guy's playing second or short or center or catcher, and the other guy's playing first or a corner outfield spot, you got to weigh that, because all in all, the better player, unless he's a terrible defender, is a guy who's playing the higher impact defensive position. But if Jordan had just boosted his numbers out of conference, because I think everything's got to be looked at here when we're putting everybody under a microscope, but that's been the one thing that's handicapped him, and it's just really weird.
Yeah, it's been traditional for him, so this year's not unusual. He's a slow starter, and then he really picks it up at the end. I mean, he's a better player in SEC play than non-SEC play for whatever reason, but he just gets off to a slow start, and those numbers hinder him a little bit. But, he's still a strong guy, catalyst at the top of their lineup, really good leadoff hitter, has got some power, can really play center field. I mean, really, really play center field. And, he also has Tanner Allen hitting behind him. I think they hit 1-2 in their lineup. And so they may be the best 1-2 punch in the conference. Leadoff guy followed by the number 2 guy. They may be among the best there is in this league. And just a really good player, but, has trouble starting slow, but seems to overcome that every year. And, you see his numbers have improved this year as well. He's just that kind of guy that slow starter, but fast finisher. But will he have enough of a fast finish to overtake the guy who plays next to him in right field that's done it every day and done it since day one? And I don't know if he could do that, because, I mean, they're both really good players, but I think Tanner Allen, probably a little bit more deserving than Rowdy is at this point.
Freshman of the year is going to be very interesting, because we got some great freshman hitters in this league, better than usual. I've got, in the overall rankings, I got 3 freshmen in there. I've got Enrique Bradfield Jr. at Vanderbilt at 3rd, which I didn't expect to have him that high, but I think there's a case for it. I've got Trey Morgan at LSU just behind him at 4. I've got Dylan Cruz at 11. The difference to me was Bradfield and Morgan are producing at a pretty similar level. Of course, Vanderbilt's done more, and so Bradfield's contributions have mattered a little bit more in that context. The other thing is he plays center field, and Morgan's a first baseman. And if you watch Bradfield, he is a game changer. He will make diving grabs in center that I don't know that anybody else in the league will make. The arm is not great, but it's not really hurt him a lot. And I think the value with the glove is just off the charts. The other thing with him, and you've seen it too, Barry, when he gets on base, there's an intangible quality to what he does. It's not just what the 38 steals and 41 tries or whatever he's at these days, but it's the fact that he takes so much attention from a pitcher. I mean, you just the throws over to base. I watched him against Florida, and I think he gets on to lead off the game. Florida waters down the base pass to the point where he's got to change his uniform after the fourth inning. I think they throw to first 9 times with him over there. First batter of the game. So the pitcher's attention is already diverted from the batter. You got to defend everything differently. I just think that all the things that he does that you can't measure, and boy, the things he measures are great, but he just adds so much just with his presence that's hard to quantify.
Yeah, I mean, he's a, bona fide leadoff hitter that's so dangerous. We talked about him a while ago. He's dangerous at the plate. He's dangerous with his feet. He's dangerous with his glove. And, certainly somebody that Vanderbilt has leaned on all year long. But, this is a guy that, he's not afraid to walk, and he can hit. And when he's on first base, he's a problem, and he's a huge problem. And you talk about the distractions, people say, well, he only threw, pitcher only threw 87 pitches or 92 pitches. Yeah, but he threw to first base 17 times during the game. Oh, really? Yeah. And that, that counts. I mean, it's not like he's throwing it to the plate, but you're still making throws to first base. I mean, he's a problem for defenses. And he's a problem for pitchers because a pitcher now would go, well, if I don't hold him on, he's going to steal second and he's going to steal third and he might steal home. And then you got to hold him on. You got to keep the first baseman near the bag and hold him on, not to give him a huge lead. And then what happens when a left-handed hitter's up and he squirts one right through the hole and now you're first and third. And he's caused you a problem in that way. And just a really good leadoff hitter. Dynamic player. I mean, I like him. I think Morgan's a really good player. A lot of consistency at the plate. Hitting the long ball for them at LSU. Again, from the theory, could LSU be 5th in the West without Trey Morgan? The answer is probably yes. Could Vanderbilt be in contention for the SEC championship without Enrique Bradfield? That's probably a yes, just because of their pitching. But I'm not sure that without him that they would be as good as they are, because he's just such a catalyst for their offense and sets the table for the guys behind him. And I think he causes a lot of problems for them. So to me, being on the better team, more key situations, and I'm not taking anything away from Morgan, but he's just had a really good year. But Bradfield might be just a little bit, because he can do more. And I know Morgan is sexy that can hit the doubles and the home runs, and that goes a long way for people. But at the same time, speed kills, and Bradfield can certainly run and scoot around the bases. And when you talk about maybe a 4 or 5 pitch walk and then steal second, steal third, and he's over there going, you're looking at him going, my God, he's going to steal home. And then you really caused a problem for the pitcher and for the defense.
All right, got a few minutes left. We're going to preview Arkansas and Tennessee tomorrow, probably have a special guest or two to help us through that. So we're going to not discuss that one right now. But the other series, Vanderbilt travels to Ole Miss. Mississippi State hosts Missouri. Florida hosts Georgia. South Carolina goes to Kentucky. Alabama goes to LSU. And A&M goes to Auburn. I think that's it. think I've got them all. Barry, what stands out to you if we're going to take Arkansas and Tennessee off the table?
Well, if we take Arkansas and Tennessee off the table, I think one series, obviously Vanderbilt and Ole Miss is a big deal, and we touched on that a little bit earlier with the pitching matchup for Friday night. Kumar Rocker against Doug Nikhazy. I think that may be one of the top 5 pitching matchups of the year in this league. An Ole Miss team that they need a win. I mean, they got to win, and I don't know even if they win this series this weekend if they're going to have enough to crawl back into hosting contention. But if they don't win this series, I don't see any way that they would host a regional in Oxford, and I think they would be on the road. Very good Vanderbilt team on the road, 9-3, lost only one series this year. An Ole Miss team that's 8-4 at home, not terrible, but usually better for them than that. So very interesting series for me, and a team in Vanderbilt who leads the league, obviously because of Kumar Rocker. 7-1, in SEC opening games of a series, and that's something that Ole Miss is going to try to put behind them, tomorrow night, and try to see if they can get Nikhazy matched up with Rocker and win. Also, they're kind of down at the bottom, but LSU and Alabama and A&M and Auburn, kind of 2 series that, Auburn's, not a very good team at home, haven't been. They're playing A&M, who's on the road. You've got the worst home team in the SEC, Auburn, at 2-10 against the worst SEC road team, Texas A&M, 2-10. Well, somebody's going to win that series. And will it be A&M? Will it be Auburn? A&M holds a 1-game lead over Auburn for the last spot in the tournament. Missouri is 2 games behind A&M, and LSU is comfortably 2 games ahead of A&M and 3 ahead of Auburn and 4 ahead of Missouri. Even if they lose 2 out of 3 to Alabama this weekend, I think it'd be very difficult for them to be caught. Even if they tie Auburn, they won the tiebreaker, and then they play A&M next week. So, how will LSU respond at home this weekend against Alabama? Alabama has played pretty well on the road, but, didn't win at Vanderbilt last week. 11-12. I think it's a big series for Alabama, going on the road and trying to win, down at LSU, something that, hasn't happened a ton over the past. And then one just little side thing that I thought was very interesting. I don't think Missouri and Mississippi State is a very compelling series because I think Mississippi State will win that with ease. But Mississippi State tonight is going to honor James J.T. Cool Papa Bell.
Oh,
one of
nice.
the great Negro League players of all time, and has never played in the majors and is still in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He is a nearby Starkville native, and had he had the opportunity to go to college, he actually worked at Mississippi State as a kid. Had he had the opportunity to go to college, not a lot of opportunities for him back in the day, probably would have attended Mississippi A&M, which is now Mississippi State, and just had a phenomenal career and a phenomenal player. And Mississippi State tonight at Dudy Noble Field will name the left field terrace the James Cool Papa Bell left field terrace. And a couple of his nephews are going to be there. There's a great story, great comments by John Cohen. He said he's a Starkville native. He's a Mississippi. He worked at Mississippi State. Had the situation been right for him, he would have gone to school here. And he said, I think it is only fair and right for him to be honored in his hometown, at his school, and in his stadium. And he said, Thursday night, we're going to do that. And I think that is super cool. And I wish I could go and be there and see that. They're going to show it on the video board before the game. Game is on ESPNU tonight, so hopefully they'll share that with us. But, that's a good story. If you don't know who James Cool Papa Bell is, Google him, because this guy could play with anybody and should have had the right to play in the big league, in the major leagues. He even said in the story, there's a story on him by Rick Cleveland in the Jackson Clarion Ledger yesterday. That's how I saw that. And he was talking about Jackie Robinson going to the major leagues. he goes, Jackie Robinson did a lot for the color barrier and helped with the major leagues. He goes, but Jackie Robinson wasn't the best player in the Negro leagues. He said he just got the opportunity, and then he became a better player when he got in the major leagues. He goes, but Jackie Robinson wasn't the best player here. And so that tells you a lot about Jackie Robinson, the struggles that he had and what he had to overcome to get into the major leagues and play and be the first African-American to play, Major League Baseball, and to hear the comments from, Cool Papa Bell and, talking about that. But that's kind of a neat thing tonight. And, I commend Mississippi State and John Cohen and their president and board of trustees and all for doing that and honoring a true American baseball sports hero and a guy that was a trendsetter, for African-American baseball players, many, many years ago. And there is a James Cool Papa Bell Museum in Jackson. It's adjacent to Smith Wills Stadium, the old ballpark where the Jackson Generals played. If you've never been to Jackson, Mississippi, I urge you to go there and check that out. It's a wonderful facility and has a lot of his great memorabilia there. And James Cool Papa Bell, one of the great baseball players and one of the great gentlemen of our sports era.
Yeah, that is a wonderful story. He's the one about which Satchel Paige said he could flip off the light switch and he was so fast he could be in bed before it got dark, which is one of the best baseball quotes ever. But one thing on my baseball bucket list, I'd like to go see the Negro League Hall of Fame. I've seen the big one in Cooperstown, but I was a kid, so I'd like to go back. But that's one of those things that if you're driving to Omaha this summer, and certainly some of you in the audience will be doing that, that's in Kansas City. That might be a thing where I try to leave a little bit earlier if I drive out this year to go to Omaha and see if I can make that happen. That's one of the things that I'd like to do. And just thinking as you're saying that, that's a great opportunity to maybe do two things in one.
Yeah, that's certainly a bucket list thing for me. And there is one. I'll say this for our fans: when you come to Hoover this year, the new ballpark in downtown Birmingham, Regions Field, where the Barons play, there is a museum that pays homage to the Negro Leagues and the Birmingham Black Barons that is in the building in left field outside the stadium when you come to Birmingham and Hoover this year. So there might be a opportunity to come and take a look at that. A lot of history in Birmingham at Rickwood Field when the Birmingham Black Barons were here. And then when they later returned in the 80s and became the Birmingham Barons, a lot of history in the city. And the Black Barons and the Barons have all played at Rickwood Field, the Hoover Met, and now Regions Field in downtown. So they've had three parks they've played in, and they pay great respects to those gentlemen who paved the way in the old Negro leagues back in the day in Birmingham. And that's certainly something that people should come down and take a look at as well.
All right, final thing before we go, because I've got to run here. I said that I would give you my projections for the tournament bracket in Hoover. This, of course, with 2 weeks to play. Here's what I got, Barry. I've got 6-seeded Ole Miss taking on 11-seed Alabama on Thursday. Winner will get 3rd-seeded Tennessee. The other part of the top half of the bracket, 7th-seeded South Carolina facing number 10 Kentucky. Winner getting number 2 Vanderbilt. At the bottom, and I think this is the tougher part of the bracket, 8 Georgia facing 9 LSU with the right to play 1 Mississippi State and 5 Florida playing 12 Auburn, the winner taking on 4 Arkansas. And I know Arkansas fans are going, what the heck? We're the best team in the country. We're the 4 seed in the SEC tournament. That is life in the SEC. The way I've got this playing out, well, I will say my prediction. Well, no, I'll go ahead and tell. I've got Arkansas losing 2-1 to Tennessee and then beating Florida 2-1. I've got the Vols winning that one and then losing 2-3 at South Carolina. That might be far-fetched. I mean, you could easily see Tennessee go to South Carolina and take that series also, which means all of a sudden you got Tennessee and State in a tie with 21 wins. There's a million ways this thing can go. Don't shoot me. I'm going to be wrong about some of this, but if you want to know projections for the bracket, that's what I've got as of today. Anyway, we've got to run along here with our days at the 14. Thank you for listening. Tomorrow we'll have a special episode where we break down the Arkansas and Tennessee series. For Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee. Be sure to check out our website at southeastern14.com, all content free. You can get our podcast there. Please go subscribe to our podcast wherever you get those and leave us a nice rating and a review. That always helps us get noticed. Anyway, for Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee, host of The 14. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with another episode on Friday.